As an organization, our goal is always to bring in speakers we feel can truly impact our players and our staff. We're extremely honored to have Kurt Warner here with us today. Kurt is a former NFL quarterback, TV football analyst, philanthropist, husband, and father to 7 children. Kurt Warner is considered to be the best undrafted NFL player of all time. As Kurt will share with you today, his journey to becoming that player and the person he is today is truly remarkable. Warner was third on the depth chart at quarterback until his senior season at the University of Northern Iowa. Upon earning the starting job in 1993, he was named the Gateway Conference Offensive Player of the Year. However, the success of his senior year did not impress scouts enough to select him in the 1994 NFL Draft. He was signed by the Green Bay Packers as an undrafted free agent. After he was cut from the Packers training camp in '94, Warner went home to Iowa. He got a minimum wage job working the night shift at the local Hy-Vee grocery store, in addition to working as an assistant coach at Northern Iowa. But Kurt's career didn't end at that grocery store in Iowa. Instead, Warner kept working to achieve his ultimate goal of being a starting NFL quarterback. Warner moved on to play in the Arena Football League from 1995 to 1997, where he began to flourish. The success of the 1997 season called the attention of the NFL St. Louis Rams, who sent Warner to NFL Europe. After staying the spring overseas, Warner spent the 1998 NFL season as the Rams' third-string starting quarterback. Then when the Rams' starting quarterback went down with a torn ACL in '99 preseason, Warner seized his opportunity. During Kurt's 12-year career, he played for 3 NFL teams, the St. Louis Rams, the New York Giants, and the Arizona Cardinals, leading both the Rams and the Cardinals to the Super Bowl. 4 Pro Bowl selections, 2 NFL MVP awards, 1 Super Bowl MVP award, and 1 Super Bowl championship later, Kurt Warner has become one of the greatest success stories in the history of sports. Kurt was a great football player, but he's an even better person, giving up himself and his time to countless charities. He's a man of faith and a true role model to so many. It is with great honor that I introduce Kurt Warner.
Hey, how you guys doing this morning? It's hard to do bad here in Arizona, isn't it? Man, when every day you wake up, sun's out. But I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you guys. Congratulations on all the recent success within the organization. It's pretty awesome. I was back in Kansas City covering a Monday night game last year as you guys were heading into the playoffs, and it was pretty cool to see the buzz and the excitement that this organization was bringing to the town. So congratulations on that. I'm going to start with just asking you a question. What is your greatest accomplishment? What is your greatest accomplishment? That's something that I've been asked so many times over the years, so many interviews that I've done, and people always want to know, what's your greatest accomplishment? And it's funny because more times than not, they try to answer that question for you. They're like, oh, it's got to be, winning the Super Bowl, right? The Super Bowl ring, because from the time that I was about this big, I dreamed of winning a Super Bowl and putting on one of those Super Bowl rings. And, so they're like, oh, it's got to be the Super Bowl ring, right, Kurt? And, I have to proceed to tell them a story that, I don't wear my Super Bowl ring very often. And, every once in a while people come to the house and they're like, can I see your Super Bowl ring? And I'm like, sure, no problem. So I go into my office where it's usually, in one of the cabinets there. And I go in to look and find it, and I'm nowhere to be found. I'm sitting here going, I have no idea where my Super Bowl ring is. And, so we pass the time, and a couple months later, I've got 7 kids, but I've got 2 9-year-old daughters. And they decided they wanted to play store in their room. So they're like, Dad, come on into our room. We've got a store set up in there. I want to see if you want to buy anything. And I'm thinking, all right, I'll go in and humor you guys. There's some old dolls in there and stuff. And so I'm looking around, obviously nothing that I really want to purchase, but having fun with the girls. And one of my girls walks over to me, and she's got a little purse. And she opens up the purse, and she goes, Dad, how about one of these? And inside her purse were my 3 championship rings, my Super Bowl ring and my 2 championship rings. And she's like, Dad, you want to get one of these? And I'm like, okay, there's where my Super Bowl rings are. And, the good news is that I got all 3 of them back for 25 cents a piece. So 75 cents for those rings. So it was a pretty good deal. But, I tell you that because it's like, for so long I wanted this Super Bowl ring. now I have no idea where they're at. I never wear them, and realize it's not really about that. You know, and people say, well, it must be the MVP trophy, right? MVP trophies got to be so cool to, you know, have up in your house and kind of look up at in your office. And, you know, again, I have to tell them a story. I tell them a story that, you know, just like you heard, I played on a few NFL teams, so I remember moving from St. Louis to New York. And then we moved from New York to Arizona, and we were only in New York for 9 months, so we really didn't unpack a lot of stuff. But when we got to Arizona, we got this house, and we had this nice little office, so my wife decided she wanted to decorate it with some of you know, my sports stuff. And so, you know, as we're going through it, she's like, okay, yeah, you know, I want to put your 2 MVP trophies up here. And so we go looking through the garage, and you come to the big container that I had that, you know, houses the MVP trophies. You know, they give you this big metal container. It looks like, you know, you got to get a bomb to get into it. And so I go and grab it, and I take it into the office. I'm like, okay, here they are. And we open it up, and my MVP trophy's not in there. And so we go looking through the entire house and come to realize that we've lost my MVP trophy. If you can imagine calling up the NFL and asking them if they could make you another MVP trophy because you've lost the one that you had, it didn't go over so well with the NFL, but fortunately they made me a replica of it. But again, it's the point that, you know, here everybody thinks this is what it's all about. It's about the trophies, it's about the MVPs, it's about Super Bowl rings. No idea where my MVP trophy even was. Still don't know to this day because we never put it out. It's somewhere in the garage somewhere. So everybody was like, well, it's got to be some of the records that you set, right? I mean, and I remember growing up, I don't know if any of you guys were like me, but I used to read the Guinness Book of World Records. And I used to, you know, turn to the sports page, and I'm like, someday I'm going to have my name in the Guinness Book of World Records. That's what, you know, that's one of my goals. I want to have that. And so a couple years ago, I bought a Guinness Book of World Record for one of those books for my boys, so they could kind of check through it and look through it because they're budding athletes like I was. And, you know, didn't really know what was in it. But, you know, after a couple days, my boys came in and they're like, Dad, did you know you're in the Guinness Book of World Records? And I'm like, you know, the chest puffs up a little bit and you're like the cool dad for a second. I'm like, no, guys, I didn't know I was in there. They're like, yeah, Dad, you threw the longest interception return for a touchdown in Super Bowl history. And I'm like, seriously? That's why, after all these years of wanting to get in the Guinness Book of World Records, that's why I'm in there. You know, but I say all that stuff just to joke around because for the longest time, I thought that's what life was all about. I thought it was about the rings and the trophies and setting records and all this stuff that could bring attention to me. And what I came to realize over the years is that if that's all I was shooting for, if that's all life was really about, then I missed the mark, fellas. I've missed the mark. And what I loved about the game of football and sports in general is that the game of football is the ultimate team sport, I believe. You know, take 11 guys working together at any one time to have success. And all it takes is one guy not doing his job at any one time for you not to have success. And so I came to realize that at the end of the day, you know, the rings and the trophies would never be my greatest accomplishment. For me, the greatest accomplishment would be to be able to have impact on other people. That it wasn't about just me proving to people that I was great, but it was the ability to lead a group of men so that we could become great together. That to me was what I wanted to accomplish. When it was all said and done, I wanted people to remember me as having an impact on the people around me. If that was the case, that would always be my greatest accomplishment. Anybody here like the movies? Anybody like to go to the movies? All right, a few guys. Love to go to the movies. And my wife and I, having 7 kids, we don't get away very often, but every once in a while we get a chance, and it always seems like we want to go to the movies. We want to get lost in some great stories. And so I remember one day we had a little time, we were going to go on a little date, so my wife and I, let's go hit the movies. So we check out what's on in the movies, and sure enough, you know, couldn't really find anything that we wanted. So my wife's like, how about we just rent a movie, and, you know, we'll take some snacks into the bedroom, and we'll just make it a date in our own house. And I'm like, that's cool. So I'm like, okay, you go to the room and get ready. I'm going to go, and I'll grab the snacks, and I'll meet you in there. And so I'm running and grabbing the popcorn and stuff, and then all of a sudden I'm thinking, oh, no, don't ever let the wife pick the movie, right? You know, if I'm going to spend my afternoon watching a movie, I don't want to watch a chick flick. So I try to hurry up and get my snacks and everything, and I'm running into the bedroom, hoping that I get there before she's picked the movie. And sure enough, she's already picked it. She's already got her chick flick. It's the movie 300. I gotta preface that with the fact that my wife was a former Marine. So a chick flick for my wife is a little bit different than a chick flick for most people. So we decided to watch the movie 300. Any of you guys watch that movie? Anybody ever seen that movie, 300? I tell you what, when I came today and when I prepared this speech, I had a few clips from that movie that I was going to share with you guys. Because this got a little bigger than they had thought, and I appreciate that. We don't have the AV, but I know it's early, but I'm going to need some crowd participation on this one. For those of you guys that have seen the movie, you guys remember the different times in the movie where they have the battle cry of the Spartans, right? You know, when he goes, you know, whatever he says, and then 3 times they go, hoo, hoo, hoo. So I want you to give me one right now. When I point at you, I need you to give me one, all right? Give me one. Oh, come on. You guys could do better than that. I don't know how many guys we got out here, but like you're going to battle, like you're going to play today. Give me something right now. Come on. All right, that's what I'm talking about. And so I'm going to try to play out a couple of these scenes because they're really pertinent to what I want to say today. And the first one is when, if those of you guys that haven't seen the movie, it's about the Spartans. You know, versus this other group of 10,000 Persians. I mean, tens and thousands of Persians. And the Spartans take 300 guys. That's the name of the movie, obviously 300. King Leonidas takes 300 guys, and they're going to battle these hundreds of thousands of guys. And that's the premise of the whole movie. And so there's a great scene when they get to this little cut, this little pass, that they say, this is where we're going to win. We're going to sit in these gates where it's only so wide, they can't get through, and this is how we're going to have our success. And so he gives them, to me, it's like the ultimate pregame speech. You know, he's out there and he's firing his guys up as they're about to go to battle. You know, and King Leonidas suddenly stands up and he says, this is where we hold them. This is where we fight. This is where they die. And then he says, on these shields, boys. That's right. And on these shields, boys, and he gives the cry, and he says, remember this day, for it will be yours for all time. And I love that. You know, it's one of those where you go, you hear that speech, and you're like, man, I'm ready to go. You know, give me my shield, give me my spear, I'm ready to go to battle. But the one part that I love about this movie is that King Leonidas is giving them this speech, and he's getting them fired up. But you know who the first one out into battle was? It was King Leonidas. That it wasn't just him getting his guys fired up, because I think so often when we think leadership, and we got so many leaders out there, and they think, well, my job is to get my guys fired up to go out and do their job. I'm a firm believer that leadership starts with our actions. That leadership is about inspiring others with our actions. So King Leonidas gave a great speech, and there's no question that those 300 men would have gone out and battled for him if he had stayed behind. But the most powerful part of that whole scene is the fact that the king speaks and then the king leads. The king goes out to battle. He's the one that says, we're going to sacrifice, I'll be the first one to sacrifice. We're going to work, I'll be the first one to work. That to me is where leadership starts, guys. That's what it's all about. That's how you impact the lives of other people with our actions on a daily basis. And what I love too about leadership is that it's not about title. And it's not about position, and it's not about what you've accomplished. We all have opportunities to lead the guys around us, whether it's me with my 7 kids, whether it's me as a husband, whether it's me as a quarterback of a football team. I have opportunities to lead all the time. And, you know, I'm always watching my kids, you know, because as a father, you're always trying to teach your kids. You're always trying to see, do they have these little traits that can help them be great in life, that can help them accomplish something, that can help them impact people. So I'm always watching the actions of my kids and always telling them, you know, don't be the one that just says it. Be the one that does it. You know, be a doer. You know, that's what I want from them. So, you know, I'm always watching. And I told you I got 2 9-year-old twin daughters. And I got one daughter that, you know, one of her favorite passions is eating. You know, I can understand that. I love to eat too. And so, you know, everywhere she goes, she's always got like a snack in her hand. So I remember one time, you know, I'm in the kitchen and I hear some rustling around in the pantry. And so I'm like, Sienna, is that you? You know, that's my daughter's name, Sienna. Figuring she was the one that was, was going to be in the pantry. You know, I always say, one of the big worries when you live in Arizona is that everybody has a pool. So when you have kids, you always got to be worried about them as a parent. And I always tell people that with 7 kids, as long as I look out the window and I see 6, I know I'm good, because Sienna, I would always say, she's always inside in the kitchen eating something, so I don't have to worry about her having any problem out in the pool. But so she's in the pantry, and I'm like, I know that's her. Sienna, is that you? She's rustling around a little bit more. Nothing. She's not responding back to me. And all of a sudden, I hear this big smack. Like somebody just fell and it hit the ground. And as a parent, that's, you just sit there and you brace yourself for that huge scream that's going to come when your kids fall. Silence. Nothing there. And I'm thinking to myself, what? Somebody just, so I'm like, okay, I better go in there. There's no movement. There's no noise. She might have hurt herself. So I go in there, and sure enough, it's my little daughter, and she's laying on her back on the ground, like she had just fallen. And she looks up at Dad, and she smiles, and she holds up a bag of Oreos. She's like, Dad, I got it. She had climbed up 2 or 3 rungs in the pantry because she had to get those Oreos. She was so passionate. They're up there, I'm getting them. Nothing is stopping me from getting those Oreos. And again, I have fun with it, but I'm sitting there inside going, yes, I got one that's willing to do whatever it takes for whatever they're passionate about. I've got an older son, he's 25 years old, and he was injured when he was 4 months old. He was dropped and suffered a traumatic brain injury when he was 4 months old. And we were told he'd be lucky to live. If he lived, he would be lucky to sit up, would never walk, would never go to school, all these different things. I'm happy to say he's 25 now, graduated from high school, very high functioning, carries a couple jobs right now. But I'll remember all growing up, he's legally blind, as well as some of the other disabilities that he faces. And I'll never forget the first time that he looked up at me and said, Dad, my dream is to, when I get to be 16, to drive a car. I'm going to drive a car. And, my wife and I, just crushed us on the inside, because we knew with his disabilities, with his blindness, that he would never be able to drive. But from the time he was little, whether it was the little electronic cars with the batteries, coming out of the garage, he was driving. No matter what it was, if it had wheels, he was trying to drive it from the time he was little. And always that, one day I'm going to drive a car. One day I'm going to be able to drive, Dad. You never as a parent want to crush their dream, and you kind of just hang on to it knowing that it's, very unlikely that it's ever going to happen. And, I remember, like a lot of kids, every once in a while I put him on my lap in the car, and he'd kind of drive, a little bit on Dad's lap, or we got a John Deere tractor. And that was kind of like the best thing. So we're out mowing the lawn, and he's sitting on my lap and letting him able to drive it. And that was like the closest we ever thought that he would be to driving. And I remember one day going, you know what? He's always kind of been on my lap. I'm gonna get off the John Deere tractor. And we had a little roundabout in our driveway, and I thought, okay, I'll let him drive by himself. Everybody said he would never do it. I'm going to let him drive by himself. So put him on the tractor, and, he starts driving around that circle, and he's very cautious, very slow, just kind of driving around, doing just a great job. Big smile on his face. I mean, I don't know, going 2 miles an hour maybe, but a huge smile on his face as he's driving around this circle and just having a blast. And I couldn't get myself to, to get him off of it. So, I went inside to get some lemonade or something, and, after about 30, 45 minutes, my wife's like, where's Zach? I'm like, oh man, I let him drive the tractor. I forgot about him. So I'm hoping he's still out there, or maybe he came in. And so my wife and I, we walk over to the front door, and sure enough, there he is, still driving around that circle. It had been 45 minutes. And we just continued to watch. And he drove that circle until he ran out of gas. He just continued to drive and continued to drive. And it wasn't anything fancy. He wasn't going 100 miles an hour. But it was something that they told him he could never do. And I'll never forget that scene in my mind, because it was at a time when I was going through some struggles, a time when I had been benched and was about to be released by one of my team. And I remember sitting and watching, you go, you know what? They told him he couldn't do it either. They told me many times that I couldn't do it. They told me before I got to Arizona, well, you'll never be able to do it again. And I'll never forget that time of him just driving around and just kind of in the face of everybody saying, you said I'd never do it? Well, I'm right here and I'm doing it. I'm driving. and I got a smile on my face, and I don't care what anybody else says. But to me, I take messages from that and say, you know what? Watching his actions and watching him say, I'm never going to stop, I'm never going to quit, is something that's fed me my entire life. That, you know what? Nobody's ever going to tell me I can't do something. You know, I saw this little kid, wasn't supposed to live, wasn't supposed to sit up, graduated high school, works 2 jobs, able to drive a tractor. I mean, these things that they never said he would do. Fellas, that's what this is all about. It's about inspiring other people with your actions. You know, not just what you say and not just those kinds of things, but it's what do you do on an everyday basis to inspire the people around you, to impact the people around you, to let the people around you know, I am never going to stop chasing after what it is that I believe in, chasing after what my dream is. That to me is why I'm standing here right now, but it's little examples like that I saw on a daily basis that impacted me. You know, so that's the first thing. Inspire others with your actions. That's where it starts. Show the sacrifice. Show the hard work. Then there's another scene in this movie, my favorite scene in the entire movie. And it's a scene where the Spartans go up on this little hill, and these allies have come to kind of join the Spartans. And the leader of the other group, you know, he comes to King Leonidas and he says, you know, we heard that Sparta was on the warpath and we were excited to join forces. But he says, you brought only this handful of soldiers against Xerxes and these hundreds of thousands of Persians. And then he looks at the king and he says, you know, I guess I was wrong to expect the Spartans' commitments to at least match our own. And I love this because King Leonidas looks back at the other guy and he goes, oh, doesn't it? And he starts to point out the soldiers in the other guy's group. And he looks at one of the soldiers and he goes, you right there, what is your profession? And the guy goes, well, I'm a potter. And he looks at another one and he goes, well, what's your profession? And the guy goes, well, I'm a sculptor. And then he looks at one more and he says, how about you? What's your profession? And he goes, I'm a blacksmith. And then he just turns and he goes, Spartans, what is your profession? That's it. And all they do is give the war cry. All they do is say, this is our profession. He looks back at him and says, well, old friend, you see, I brought more soldiers than you did. And what I love about that is that their job, their life is committed to being a soldier. All he was saying is that these other guys, they're dressed up like a soldier. You know, they come out here, you know, on the weekends and grab their sword and their spear, and they say, well, we're warriors too, we're soldiers too. But the message in that was that it was their profession. This is what they did. Every moment of every day was committed to the battles that they were facing. And to me, that's what leadership is all about. It's about making it your profession, regardless of what it is, whether it's being a father, you know, whether it's being a baseball player, whether it's being, for me, a Christian guy, you know, whether it's leading a business, being the coach of a team. Do you make it your profession? Does it look the same every moment of every day? Or is it just, well, I put in my 8 hours of being a leader. You know, I put in my 2 hours of working out or my 3 hours on the field, and then I go and I'm something completely different? You know, I'm a potter or a sculptor. Or do you make it your profession to be great at everything you do? That to me has always been my mindset. Man, I don't do a lot of things. I don't have a lot of hobbies. I don't have a lot of great friends. Why? Because I know the more spread out I get, the less chance there is of being great at everything I do. The less chance there is of making it my profession to focus in on being great at something. You know, having 7 kids, I get the opportunity every once in a while. My boys will invite me in to play a video game. Not very often, but every once in a while, and usually when we play, we love to play sports games. We love to play Madden. And so I remember a time that the boys invited me to come in and play Madden against them. So it was my 2 boys, 16-year-old, 11-year-old, and then I was on the other team because, of course, they wanted to beat Dad. So we're in there playing and, you know, having a good time. At least I thought we were having a good time. And my 11-year-old kind of sneaks out of the room and disappears for a while. And I'm thinking, oh, you know, I'm taking a break, going to the bathroom, whatever it is. And sure enough, a little while later, he sneaks back into the room. And so we start playing again. And then before I know it, I could just feel the presence of somebody at the door. And I know without a doubt, without even looking, I know it's my wife. And I'm not really sure, you know, what she's here for, but, you know, at some point I kind of glanced up, you know, and she was kind of sitting there against the door, with their, arms crossed, giving me that look. That look like, really? It's a video game. Do you really have to beat your boys 45-0 in a video game? Do you really have to do it? So my son had left and told mom that I was crushing him in a video game. So she had come back to lay down the hammer. And I'm thinking, I turned to her and I'm like, well, they're going to lose sometime in life. So why not in the comfort of their own home, right? Why not to their dad? But I say that because I've always felt like if I'm going to do something, do it the best that I can do it. Whether it's playing a video game or it's showing up on a Sunday afternoon to play football, or whether it's spending time with my daughters reading before they go to bed, it's about connecting and making it my profession to be great at everything that I do. To be great at everything that I do. I want it to be my profession. When people see me as a father, they say, man, this guy's a great father. When they saw me, on the football field, they say, this guy's a great quarterback. When they saw me in a position of leadership, they say, this guy's a great leader. I want to commit to making it my profession to be great, to be excellent at everything that I do. I get an opportunity to sign a number of autographs. And, being a Christian guy, I'm always trying to put a verse connected to my name. And a lot of people always think that when I write down those verses, that it's for the person that's getting the autograph to go home and open their Bible and read what it has to say. And if they do that, that's great. But what they don't realize is that I write down those verses on there as a reminder to me of why I am where I am, how I got to where I am. The reason that I'm here and have the platform I do is because God placed me here. And He placed me here with an objective. And one of the verses that I always sign is Colossians 3:23. And it says, whatever you do, do it with all your heart as if working for the Lord. Whatever you do. To me, guys, that's what life's all about. Whatever you do, be great at it. Make it your profession to be great at everything you do. That to me is the second part of leadership. We inspire with our actions and we make it our profession to be excellent at everything that we do. The third scene that I want to show you guys, the end of the movie, the last scene in the entire movie. The 300 had battled and, so to speak, they lost their lives in that battle. But the last scene of the movie, they pan out and there's hundreds and thousands, not of Persians this time, but of Greeks, of Spartans mixed in, hundreds of thousands of them. And a guy's giving a speech, and it's like, it's been about a year since Leonidas and his 300 gave their lives at that battle. And he said, word spread that Leonidas and his brave 300 gave their lives for the promise this country holds so dear. He says, today we rescue a world from mysticism and tyranny, and we usher in a brighter future than we could ever imagine. Says, give thanks to Leonidas and his brave 300. And then he goes on to victory. And these thousands of men take off. And I love the scene because the movie is about 300, right? It was about the 300 that went to battle. 300 guys against hundreds of thousands. There's no way 300 is going to beat hundreds of thousands, right? But the lives of those 300, the impact that those 300 had, are shown at the end of the movie. Because word is spread about what these guys did, about how they lived, about what they gave. And that, although those 300 never got to see it, that turned into hundreds of thousands of men that went out and won the battle. Ultimately won the battle because 300 were willing to give their lives. And I love that because, like I said, King Leonidas was the first one to go to battle. And I see so many leaders, I see so many guys in positions that feel like their goal is to hold on to their position. Their goal is to hold on to their title. I can't tell you how many times I've heard about quarterbacks that are in this quarterback room and they're afraid to share anything with the younger quarterbacks because their whole goal is to hold on to what they have. The power of that scene to me is that great leaders are all about leaving a legacy of leaders. Great leaders are about being able to pass down what you have to someone else. It's not about holding on to a title. It's not about holding on to a position, but it's about impacting people to take my position, to be able to take the torch when it's time to take the torch, to be able to live to the same level, to be able to play at the same level that I did, or even exceed that. That to me is what true leadership is about, guys. It's about living today to impact the world for tomorrow. That's what this movie was all about. And so I'm going to finish with this, is that I talk a lot about my kids because my kids are always great examples to me of what I need to do and how I need to lead them, but also whether I'm doing my job, whether I'm living to be the leader that I've called to be inside my family. And so I'm always watching them. That's why I use different stories about them, because I'm always looking at those things. And I know you guys have seen him. My little guy is a sports fanatic, loves sports. And so he's always got those Nike shirts on. You know, those different Nike shirts with slogans, you know, like Clutch is my middle name. You know, or it's like, my game is sick. Too bad it's not contagious. You know, he loves those kinds of shirts, loves that stuff. Yeah, so one day he's wearing this shirt that says, one day they'll make a movie about me. One day they'll make a movie about me. And I remember, you know, asking him, I thought, well, I got to use these as teaching moments. And so I'm like, oh, do you really think his name's Elijah? I'm like, Elijah, do you really think one day they're going to make a movie about you? You know, and he kind of, you know, gave me that look, and he's like, well, yeah, maybe, Dad. And I'm like, okay, if they do, why are they going to make a movie about you? And he answered back with, you know, the same things I would have said when I was 11. The same things that I started this message with. He's like, well, because I'm gonna win Super Bowls, and I'm gonna set records, and I'm gonna be an MVP. And I remember looking back at him, I said, yeah, those things are great. But what I said is, a lot of people do those things. There's a lot of guys that have won MVPs and have set records and have won Super Bowls. But they don't make movies about all those guys. Who do they make movies about? They make movies about people that, yes, have accomplished great things, but they make movies about people that have impacted other people. They make movies that are going to impact people into the future, that are going to leave a legacy. So I said, that's great. I want you to chase after your dreams, and I want you to be great at whatever sport, whatever business, whatever you decide to do. But I said, if you want them to make a movie about you, it's got to be because you've lived your life to impact other people. Guys, that's what life is all about. That's what this is all about. And I know the end goal, and sometimes the goals that we see right now are winning and starting and doing this and accomplishing that. But I guarantee it to you, at the end of the day, you'll never remember where your Super Bowl ring is. You know, you might lose your MVP trophy. The records that you set might be good, might not be so good. The bottom line is all those things come and go, guys. But the impact you have on other people, the excellence that you live your life with, will have a lasting impact that will never be forgotten. That, to me, is what life is all about. You guys are in an unbelievable position. Young age, everything's in front of you. Make sure that your life is set up not only to have success on the diamond, but to have success by impacting the people around you, by leading the people around you to greatness. So I ask you again, before you leave and as you go about your business, just think about that one question as you go from here. What is your greatest accomplishment? What is your greatest accomplishment? What do you want to be your greatest accomplishment when it's all said and done? I thank you guys for the time. I think we have some time. I'm going to open it up to questions for you guys if you have any questions for me as you go. But I appreciate the time. And I hope you guys understand the position that you're in to impact people. You're in an unbelievable position to impact people. Your teammates, the little fans, the people that come out to watch you guys play. You know, one day, if not already, your families, your friends, you're in an amazing position. Don't take that lightly. Understand that you've got a chance to really impact the world around you. Don't take that lightly. Anybody, any questions at all for me? You guys gonna make this easy on me? Yes?
Talk about being undrafted and then getting cut from the Packers practice squad and then working at Hy-Vee in the assistant coaching job with you and I. What was that fire that you had to keep going to pursue your career in football, or to keep trying when times were tough and
right.
going your way?
Right. So those of you, if you didn't hear the question, he was just asking kind of about my journey. And for those that don't know the journey, I was a guy that sat on the bench for 4 years in college. Got an opportunity with the Packers out of college, was cut about 5 weeks into that. Found myself working in a grocery store for $5.50 a night, working nights so I could work out during the day. Then I played arena football and I went to Europe. Even when I got to the NFL, to be cut from a couple different teams, to be benched a number of times, and he asked just, what kept me going? And I'll tell you what, guys, what kept me going was that I felt that I was born to play football. I felt like that was what I was supposed to do. And when I got on a football field, and I can't tell you how many times, that you come back after a season off or after being benched or whatever, and I would step on the football field for the first time. And I would always call my wife and I would just tell her, I'm like, this is what I'm supposed to do. I felt alive. I felt a passion. I felt like there was something different about me when I was on a football field than anywhere else. And I really felt like that's what made me who I was. And that's really where I was going to have the impact. So regardless of, kind of like my son, regardless of the people that told me I couldn't, I had NFL coaches that told me I could never start on their high school football team. I had people within my family say, Kurt, it's time to forget about your dream and go, get a real job. But for me, I just knew. I knew that I was created to do that. And of course, I hoped that it would be at the NFL level. I hoped that I would one day accomplish all that stuff. But that wasn't even the end goal for me. When I was playing arena football, I just knew I was supposed to be playing football. When I was over in Europe, I knew that was what I was called to do. And I wasn't going to give that away until I knew God was done with me yet. And so that's really what kept feeding that fire. When I stepped on the field, when I got a football in my hand, there was a passion there like no other. And there was no way that I could just hand that away without really exploring how far it could take me and what I could do with it. And so that's why I ended up playing in the different places that I played. But ultimately, I believe that's why I stand here before you guys today, is because that passion to be great never diminished when I was working in a grocery store or when I was playing arena football. It was what I felt I was supposed to do, and it lit a fire in me every time I grabbed a football, and that's what continued to drive me. And there were moments. There were tough moments. There were moments, I was 27 years old, and I was playing arena football, and I remember just thinking, man, not much longer. How many NFL teams are going to get up a 27-year-old rookie quarterback an opportunity? Maybe 27's not the end, but is it 28? I know it's getting close where an NFL team's just going to say, it's just not worth it. So there were moments where I had to fight that and had to, fight the urge to want to, when I was in college, to want to just say, forget it. I'm sitting on the bench for 4 years. This is ridiculous. I could spend my time and effort somewhere else. But again, every time I picked up a ball, every time I went on that field, I said, I felt this is what I was supposed to do, and so I wasn't willing to give it away for anything. Anything else? Yeah?
What was it about St. Louis that made it for you?
When it comes to St. Louis, a lot of people always ask, how were you able to, to come in and have success and quick success? And I think there's two things. The first thing was that everywhere I had been, every time I had played, I had success. I played 1 year in college. I was the player of the year in my conference. I got to play 3 years in arena football, and I was the best quarterback in the league those 3 years. I went over to Europe for 1 year, and I was the top quarterback in the league in Europe. And so that was one thing that drove me, was that I knew, inside of me that a lot of people, you go through, the bumps in the road and things that I did, and they come in and they don't have a lot of confidence. I had that going for me, was that every time I played, I was successful. So when I got into that situation, when Trent Green unfortunately got hurt, and I got thrust into the starting spot, I never questioned whether I could be successful. That was the first part of it. And then the second part of it was that just the offense that we ran, it fit who I was. And, that's one thing that I think so many guys take for granted, especially now in the age of free agency, like in our business, is that, man, bigger contract over here. I'm going to run, to the money, and I'm going to run to a different situation where I can be a starter. And then I watch guys go, and then you never hear from them again. And I think a huge key is to find the right fit, to go somewhere where they do what you do best. You know, I mean, I'm not going to go run the read zone. That's not what I do. I'm not going to go to a situation, no matter how much they pay me, in a situation where I couldn't succeed. And so what happened in St. Louis, beyond the fact that we got Marshall Faulk and Torrey Holt and Isaac, I mean, beyond the fact that we had great players around me, it was a system that really fit the way I played the game. And I realized how important that was in that first year, and I realized how important that was as I bounced around to other teams to make sure I found a place that would allow me to play the game the way I played the game. You know, because I went to the Giants for a year, and it was a reminder to me that they played the game completely different. So everybody looked at me and said, man, this guy's old and washed up, he can't play anymore. And I knew it was simply because they weren't doing it the way that I did it. So for me, it was kind of a perfect storm in St. Louis. We had great players, we had great coaches, I had a lot of confidence, but it really fit what I did, and I was able to just relax and go out and do what I do best, and it led to a lot of great success. Yeah.
Leland Clemens. And the Bible says, no one man to an island. So obviously you can't do things alone. I want to know, what was your reference point for success? And also, who was your mentor who fostered you in your career?
It's a great question. You know, just asking me what my reference points were for success, and then who were my mentors along the way, because I so agree with you, is that you can't do any of this alone. And I tell you what, guys, it's absolutely no fun to do it alone either. You know, I've seen guys that have won and had success and had nobody to share it with. And that's the greatest thing to me about sports, is that there is nothing better than being able to experience success, but to be able to do it with a team, to be able to have somebody there with you. And, you know, I often tell my kids, it's one of the most frustrating parts of sports too, is that, you know, you can go out and do a great job, and if 2 or 3 other guys don't, you don't have success. But there's nothing better than those 9 guys or those 11 guys coming together and being on one accord and being able to accomplish something together. So there's nothing sweeter than that, and I love that fact of you know, the game of football, because it's so much about life. Never succeed in life without a group of people around you. But as far as mentors, there were so many, you know, from high school coaches to a support system with my family. I mean, that was one of the greatest things, is I had a wife that believed in me too. You know, when we just been married for 3 months, and she said, go to Amsterdam, go leave and chase your dream. That stuff becomes so important, because I had so many people that were there that wanted to tell me, you'll never do it. You can't ever do it. So surrounding yourself with people that believe in you was huge for me. I had a pastor that mentored me when I got to St. Louis and kind of fell into the success that really helped me, because I mean, I didn't understand how to do it. You know, I'm sure a lot of you guys find yourselves in the same spot, having success, finding yourself having money that you never had before. I had no idea what I was doing. So I really had to surround myself with people that could give me direction in different areas and keep me grounded in different areas, so I didn't allow my success, you know, to become all about me. And I didn't allow my situation to become all about me. You know, so that was huge for me. And, you know, like I said, there was coaches, there was, you know, my wife, there was pastors, but I set up a group in different areas where I always had someone to go to in whatever area I was struggling with to kind of be there on my side and kind of be a safe place to fall. So that was extremely important. And you talked about my reference point for success. You know, I think it was a couple things. Like I mentioned before, it started with the fact that I knew what I could do. I never lost sight of who I was and what I could accomplish. I think that happens sometimes in this business, where you can get beat up and you can have enough people tell you something that it starts to wear off, and you stop believing in yourself. I never stopped believing in myself. And then, you know, the Bible was always huge for me. You know, there was different reference points in there, and you know, the Bible is a book about stories of people that weren't supposed to do something, but that with God's help were able to do it. That to me is my story. I look at my life as another Bible story being played out at a different time, is that God decided to use me because I was a guy that wasn't supposed to be used, a guy that couldn't do what I was able to do, and it was only because of his hand in my life, and him bringing me along and him surrounding me with the right people. And he talks about St. Louis. And he put me in situations where I could succeed. And that's what I always believed, is that if I'm supposed to do this, God will place me in situations where I can use the gifts, the talent, the work that I put in to succeed. And that's exactly what I saw him do time and time again, even when everybody on the outside said, you'll never do it. There's no way you can ever have success. There's no way you can go from a grocery store to playing in a Super Bowl. It will never happen. And that's my reference point, is I opened up that book and I saw that it happened all the time with the help, with God's help. And that's how I walked every day, believing that one day he'll place me in a situation where I can also succeed. Anybody? Yes, sir.
Willie Akins, Kurt. I also look at my life as a Bible story too. What I want to ask you is that, did you grow up as a Christian? Did you have parents that were Christians? Or did you have a tragedy, trials, and tribulation in your life that happened to you,
right,
that allowed you to all of a sudden call on the name of the Lord and accept Jesus Christ,
right,
as your personal Savior?
Well, I was raised in the church, but I won't say I was necessarily raised as a Christian. I was raised in the church. I had a great background. I had a great foundation because my mom, my parents were divorced early. I lived with my mom because my mom made it a priority. Went to a Catholic school, went to church, did all of those things. But when I was growing up, I felt like God was there for me. I felt like that's what it was all about, is that I had these dreams of winning Super Bowl rings and being MVPs and setting records. And I always felt like, well, God was supposed to be there like a spare tire. Like when I went through something rough, it was like, God, you need to help me out of this. Or when I was going into a Friday night football game, it was, God, I was praying that he let me have a good game. When I wanted to date the pretty cheerleader, it was like, God, just give me an opportunity to date the pretty. It was always about me. God was there for me. And that's kind of how I grew up. Even though I had the foundation of who Jesus was and what he had done for me, it was never really about him. And it was much later in my life when I was 26 years old, and I was surrounded by some great people. One of them was my wife, who had been a Christian from the time she was young. Some people that were running a Bible study in arena football, and they just started asking me questions about why I believe what I believe. What am I here for? And all the answers to those questions were, basically, I'm here for me. I'm here to do this. I'm here to do that. I'm here to accomplish these great things. And I don't know if it was directly related to the tragedy, but my wife's parents were killed in a tornado. Right around the same time that on the football field I had gotten benched from my arena team. So all this stuff was kind of falling apart around me. And it was the first time in my life where I kind of called out to God and said, this is all about you. What's going on here and why am I going through this? And that was the first moment in my life that I finally realized that I was here for him as opposed to him here for me. And it was then that I kind of changed everything in my life, where it was like, no longer am I worried about winning championships and Super Bowl rings and setting records. I became worried about how can God use me where I'm at to impact the people around you. What I shared with you guys today, that became my life at age 26. Before that, it was about what can I do? What can I accomplish? What can I gain? And after that, it became what can I give? How can I lead? Where can I leave my impact on people? And I forgot to share a story when I was talking about leaving this legacy of leaders. And I'll share a quick story about Larry Fitzgerald. You guys all know the name Larry Fitzgerald, one of the greatest players in the history of our game, greatest receivers to ever play. And I remember coming here to Arizona, and we had one of our first practices. And after practice, I invited Larry over to the house for dinner. So we're having a nice dinner together, and of course, I couldn't get my mind off of football. So I kind of turned it to football, and my wife's kind of looking at me like, gosh, can't we just have a nice dinner? But I'm like, Larry, do you remember that play that happened in practice today? You did it like this, and I said, if you change up a little bit right here, and you do a little bit something different there, you're going to be awesome. You'll be able to, get that play every time. Nobody will be able to stop you. And he kind of had a smile on his face, and he kind of looked back at me, and he's like, okay, Kurt, but you know what? I'm good enough. I'm good enough. I've been to the Pro Bowl, and what I realized at that moment was that was the mentality of my whole organization. That was the mentality of all the guys, was like, we're good enough. You know, that we're here and, you know, I've had some success and it's kind of all, we're good enough. And I remember looking back at him and saying, but don't you want to be the best? Don't you want to be the best at what you do? And, you know, I'll never forget that I thought at that exact point, I said, that's exactly why God brought me here. He didn't bring me here to get to a Super Bowl, although we were fortunate to get to a Super Bowl. He didn't bring me here so that I could get up in the Ring of Honor, which I've been fortunate to do. He brought me here to instill in those guys the idea that they're called to be great at everything they do. Whether it's playing football or whether it's playing life, they were called to be great. And one of my greatest moments in my entire career was the training camp right before I retired. I took a plane trip with Larry. And, you know, this was 5 years after we had that conversation. And he looked at me and he knew that, you know, my time was getting to the end. And he looked at me and he said, you know what, Kurt? I never forgot that conversation we had that first night at your house over dinner. When you asked me if I wanted to be great, you know, and he looked back at me and he said, you know what, Kurt? Over the last 5 years, you've made me want to be great. And what I love about that is it didn't just last 5 years. Because if you watch the Arizona Cardinals right now, he's the example. He's the one that's setting the standard for everybody else to be great. And that's what I'm talking about when you talk about being a leader and leaving a legacy of leaders, is that you impact people now that will impact other people later, that will impact other people later. That to me is what I want my legacy to be. Is that Super Bowl rings come and go because somebody's going to win one next year. MVPs come and go. Records, they get broken. But the impact you have on people, it lasts a lifetime, guys. Don't take it for granted the situation that you find yourself sitting in right now, because you got an amazing opportunity to impact people and to leave an amazing legacy for other people. Appreciate the question. Anybody else? Yes, sir, way in the back.
Yeah, one of the things you mentioned that you were talking about is leaving a legacy and passing that torch. Now, what's a good example of situations you've been in where you've been able to help a younger guy? You know, what's a good way for a veteran player to help impact that player?
Man, so many of those. You know, I found myself in a number of situations. Actually, all three teams that I was with, I found my team bringing in a younger quarterback, and eventually, or at some point in that time, I lost my job to the younger quarterback, you know, to the franchise quarterback, to the guy that they were paying more money to. And it was funny because, you know, when I first won the Super Bowl, you know, I thought, man, you know, it was my first year, and I won the MVP, and I won the Super Bowl, and I thought, man, I'm going to win a whole bunch of these. Because I know that God believes I'm going to have the greatest impact on people when I'm standing up on this podium in front of hundreds of millions of people. I'm thinking, this is going to happen every year. And then a few years later, I find myself on the bench. And I find myself, you know, having to, you know, to figure out how to deal with it when you're not the guy, to figure out how to deal with the young quarterback that's in front of you that, you know, quote unquote, took your job or was given your job. And I can't tell you how many people came up to me during those moments and said, you know what? Your life and your faith and who you are, your character, spoke more loudly to me in the moments when you were down, in the moments when you were on the bench, than they ever did when you were on the podium. And I couldn't believe it when somebody said that, because I thought there was no way for me to have greater impact than when I was succeeding. And so I say that to mean that there were so many opportunities when I had the chance, and I had that moment where it's like, this guy's taking my job, or this guy's becoming the starter. Now, what do I do with that? What do I do? Do I want my job back so much that I'm not willing to teach this guy? I'm not willing to mentor this guy? Or is the big picture more important to me, that I got to treat him like I would treat everybody else? I always tell people, when I signed the contract to be a part of the St. Louis Rams or the Arizona Cardinals, there was no clause in fine print that said, you only have to be a great teammate if. You only have to have great character if. You only have to represent your faith if you're the starting quarterback. What I realized is I signed that contract to do whatever I could to make that organization great. And there were so many moments where I had that opportunity, and that greatness wasn't me being able to get on the field and inspire my teammates. Wasn't about me giving them, a speech beforehand or being able to lead them out to battle. It was about doing what I could to help the guy that quote unquote took my job to be the best that he could be. Because if he was the best he could be, that meant the team was the best that we could be. And that to me, that's just one little example of how I felt my job to leave a legacy and to lead was sometimes behind the scenes. It wasn't always the guy that was out in the forefront. It wasn't always the guy that had the title of starter. It wasn't always the guy that was the best player on the team. You have opportunities to lead in so many different ways, and that's just one example of how I realized God was using me in those moments as well. He was using me to impact people in those moments, probably more so than when I was having success, because a lot of guys can have success and do the right things. It's hard, it's much harder to do the right things when things aren't going your direction, to act the right way, to be a good teammate, to be a good leader in those moments. So that's just one example. Yes, sir.
What were some of your keys to dealing with failure on the field? Say you have a bad Sunday. How did you deal with that throughout the week? Prepare yourself to regain that confidence going into the next Sunday to go out and have a good game?
Yeah. Good question. Just ask how you deal with failure. And that's one thing that you guys know as well as I do, that there's no better place to learn how to deal with failure than in the game of sports, whatever it is, because in all the years that I've played, I've never played the perfect game. I've never gone in and said, man, every time I did the right thing, whether it was mentally or physically. So we have to learn to deal with failure. And we used to always have, we had one coach that always had this line, and he said, one snap and clear. One snap and clear. And I think a key to being a great athlete at any point in time is the ability to one snap and clear everything. And it's not just the bad moments, not just the moments when you fail, it's also the moments when you succeed. It's not allowing one play to affect the next. And it's not an overnight thing. It's something that you battle on a daily basis. I got the good fortune of being able to follow and be with my alma mater, University of Northern Iowa. I know none of you guys have heard of it, but my team was in the NCAA tournament this past week. And, I got a chance to talk to those guys a little bit. And, that was one of the messages I shared with them, is that I believe greatness can only be accomplished when your desire to be great is greater than your fear of failure. And it's a hard thing to do, guys. It's an everyday thing. Every time you step out on the field, every time, something goes against you, you have to be able to overcome that fear of failure. And I shared a story that when I was in Green Bay, my first camp that I got into after college, I was there for 2 days. We were in our first mini camp. It was our second day there, and the coach called me and said, "Kurt, go in." Didn't know any of the plays. I had no idea what I was doing. And I told the coach, only time in my entire life I told the coach, I'm not going in. I'm not going in. And my mindset was, well, if I go in and fail, that's going to ruin everything. I'll never get another chance. What ended up happening was a couple weeks later, I was cut by the Packers. And I had the fortune of talking to the coaches. I actually work with one of the coaches now. And the reason that they cut me, because I was afraid to fail. They said, we can't have and go to battle with anybody, especially at the quarterback position, that's afraid to make a mistake, that doesn't have a greater desire to be the best than they do their fear of failure. And I think that's the battle that all athletes face. I think that's a battle that we all face. We're all afraid to fail. Nobody wants to fail. Athletes, nobody wants to have a bad outing. Nobody wants to have a bad at bat. Nobody wants to have a bad game on the football field. But you're never going to play the perfect game. It's never going to work out for you every time. Is your desire to be great able to overwhelm that fear of failure? And that's on a daily basis. And for me, it was something I worked at all the time. And it was something that I continually faced. But, it started every day, is that I knew that the only reason I was going to, be able to succeed in a game was because I was willing to do those same things in practice. I was willing to try to be great in practice. And, man, there were times that I failed, and I had to learn from those failures. Whether it was You can't do that the next time. You know, even though you thought you could make that throw, you can't make that throw. Or maybe it was, well, you tried to make that throw, but that time it was too late. I had to learn from all those experiences, so I knew what could lead to greatness as well. I mean, you couldn't just go out there and just throw caution to the wind every time. You got to learn from your mistakes. You got to learn from the moments where you fail, but you can't ever let that be the overriding factor in the mindset that you take to work every day. That every day I was going to be great. Every day I was going to do something better today than I was yesterday. Oh, I failed? Okay. I'll find a way tomorrow to be better at that than I was today. And I had to continually balance those things. And I've seen a lot of players that, from the standards, they're more talented than I was. You know, they were faster than I was. They had more skill than I did. But they could never reach that level of greatness because that fear always crippled them. You know, they were the guy that always wanted to hand the ball to somebody else when the game was on the line. They were the guy that always hesitated to make that throw because they were more worried about throwing an interception than they were throwing a touchdown. And that was the thing that always crippled guys from being great. Even though they put in hard work, you know, we always talk about, you know, it's talent and it's putting in the time and it's working hard, and those things lead to greatness. Well, those things are great factors in being great. But I always believe that mindset is the most important thing. If you don't believe you're going to be great, if you're worried that you're going to fail, you'll never reach the full potential. All those things that you put in, everything that's in that pot, will never be able to reach what you can be if you're always being held back by that fear to fail. So that's all I say is dare to be great. Every day, every time you step on the field, every time you do something, just like we talked about, be great every day. Be great at everything you do and dare to do it. You know, because sometimes it's daring. You know, sometimes it's daring to put yourself out there. You know, when everybody else is worried about failing, are you willing to put yourself out there to be the one? And I always said it. What I've realized about great players is great players have a greater fear of just being one of the guys than they do of failing completely. Great players never want to be just like everybody else. Great players want to be different, and they're willing to fail to be different as opposed to just be a part of the mix. Anybody else? I know it looks like we're about out of time. Anybody else real quick? If you got something, I'd love to be able to answer it before I go. Anybody? We all good? Awesome, guys. Well, I wish you guys all the best of luck. I appreciate the opportunity and the attention to be able to talk to you guys today. But God bless you guys, and I'll be watching you guys this season.
Present your jersey here.
Oh, awesome. Great.
Kurt, on behalf of the Kansas City Royals, we appreciate you being here. Tremendous story. We all know your background as a player, but I think we all have a greater understanding why you've had so much success in football and outside of football. We'd like to present to you this Kansas City Royals jersey.
All right.
Hopefully we got everything right on that.
You got the right number. I know that. Somebody else, am I stealing somebody's number? We got a 13? Awesome.
Hopefully when you look at that jersey, you'll think of the Royals and some of the lives you've impacted today.
I appreciate it, guys. Thank you very much. Good luck to you.
Thank you very much. Excellent story.
Thanks, guys.